So I found myself in a really embarrassing situation not too long ago. I went to the market to do some shopping for things I needed. You know, something to eat, something to drink. And I was really excited because I had planned on making myself a really nice dinner that night. So I did my shopping, I went to go check out, pay for my groceries, and my card was declined. I said, that can't be right. Can you run it again? Declined. Insufficient funds. So, yeah, that was awkward. You see, I had forgotten to deposit the cash that I had in my purse into my bank account before going shopping. It was a terrible feeling to not be able to get what I needed. And it was really embarrassing because I actually had the money, I just forgot to deposit it. So I went ahead, paid with cash, went home, had my nice dinner. You see, this is how I like to think about water. I'm sure it comes as no surprise to you that here in Las Vegas, Nevada, we are experiencing extremely dry conditions, a very serious drought. And communities all across the Desert West are seeing changes in the timing and amount of rain that's falling, in more intense storms with longer dry periods in between, and falling water tables everywhere. I like to think of the earth kind of like a bank account. And we've been withdrawing and withdrawing and withdrawing, and it's been a really long time since we've made a deposit. And I'm beginning to worry that one of these days, I might not be able to get what I need, something to eat and something to drink, because there's not enough water. My name is Carmen Gonzales. I'm a member of the Navajo Nation and an environmental specialist focused on water. I've been working to serve the ancestors and the next 7 generations for over 2 decades. I've worked in many different aspects of environmental science, including pollution remediation, water quality, wetland and riparian restoration, and ecosystem restoration. 10 years into my career, though, I became disillusioned. Despite all of the things I was doing to try to make things better, I only saw that things were getting worse year after year. With all of the education and knowledge that I had no idea how to make things better. I became hopeless. And this hopelessness contributed to already existing issues I had with my mental health, issues with symptoms of depression and post-traumatic stress disorder. I've been dealing with mental health struggles for as long as I can remember. And mental health struggles are unfortunately not uncommon for Native American people. The legacy of genocide, reservations, boarding schools, relocation, disconnection from the land, loss of culture, and now bearing witness to the impact of the climate crisis has contributed to tremendous suffering among Native people and among all of us. While trying to find freedom from depression and PTSD, and while working with damaged and degraded ecosystems in my career, I asked myself this question: is healing possible? I can tell you this: healing is possible, not only for the weary of heart, but also for water. When I was young, I used to live on the Navajo reservation in Arizona. I always found peace in connecting with Mother Nature. I used to go down to the spring and sometimes sit in the shade, protected from the wind. I used to like sitting under this outcrop of sandstone, and I would play with the water. And there are many things I have learned from my teacher, water. The first thing I learned is that both us and water can suffer trauma. I believe that our true nature is very well described by the Navajo idea of hojo. Hojo is the Navajo word, and it means perfect beauty, natural balance, and the innate glimmer that every being radiates. And it's also our ability to see it in those around us as we go in the world. When this way of peace and joy is disrupted, the cycle gets broken, and illness or trauma can happen. With water, the natural cycle has been broken. You may remember learning about the water cycle in school. Water falls from the clouds as rain. Some of it makes its ways into rivers that makes its way eventually to the ocean. Some of it is taken up by the plants, and the plants let it back into the air, and we call this evapotranspiration. Some of it seeps into the ground and refills the aquifers. And the sun heats up the surface of the ocean, causing evaporation, and the cycle continues. Our land and water management, particularly since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, has disrupted the natural cycle. In particular, here in urban development, we have favored creating vast hardscapes, areas that are paved or have concrete and that no longer allow water to percolate back into the ground. Instead, water accumulates, flows right down the street, picks up all kinds of pollution, and causes flooding. Yes, even here in the desert. Not only does this contribute to dangerous flooding, increased pollution, it ends up in our lakes and our oceans, and it also keeps the water from recharging the aquifers that we rely on for drinking water. Second thing I learned from my teacher, water: healing is possible. I have been on a personal healing journey for decades. I've seen some really dark times, and there were times when I didn't think I was going to make it. I have to be vigilant and stay aware of my thoughts. I don't know about you, but my thoughts about myself can be pretty inaccurate. Interestingly, many of the ideas I was taught when I was in college about how water moves through the ecosystem were also inaccurate. When I studied hydrology, I didn't really get a full understanding of the natural water cycle. Things seem to be a little different now, and there seems to be a better understanding of ecology in the educational space. Many ways of helping to restore the natural water cycle, however, are still not being taught in colleges. Rainwater harvesting is one way I have learned of helping water return to the natural state of hojo, to balance. Rainwater harvesting uses many different methods to help rain soak into the body of Mother Earth. There are terraces and swales that can be used over very large areas of land that help regenerate aquifers and create springs. There are keyline ditches that can be used to rehydrate land and also to passively water food crops. And there are different sorts of rock and log structures that can be built, kind of like beaver dams, that help water slow down and sink into the landscape. They keep floodplains healthy, and they give water the time and space to stay clean. Indigenous people of the Southwest were very well acquainted with these rainwater harvesting methods. I was told by someone who knew how my grandpa used to manage his cornfield that he used to intentionally place logs to harvest rainwater in the drylands of Arizona. In fact, there is evidence that Indigenous people engineered earthworks in many places, both here and around the globe, to catch rain, grow food, and grow forests. I always like to remind people, natives were the first scientists and engineers here on Turtle Island. One very interesting example of ancient Indigenous engineering is right over the mountains here to the southwest in the Owens Valley. The tribe there is the Paiute tribe, and they call that valley Paya Hunaru, the land of flowing water. Tribal water scientists and water protectors revitalized the wisdom of rainwater harvesting, earthworks known as swales. For a time, these earthworks were forgotten. As settlers moved into the valley, and after the city of LA drained the Owens Lake in order to supply the demand necessary for the growing metropolis of Los Angeles, the valley is now very dry, and there's only a trickle of water left compared to the amount of water that was there when the Paiute were managing the land. With great love, the Paiute people restored the swales and began regenerative farming that now provides food for the community. The seeds from this beautiful land and water restoration work are now shared among tribes as a story of hope for future generations. Healing is possible. The third thing that I learned from water is that healing happens when we're in healthy relationship with each other. My spiritual journey has played a very important part in my healing. I have come to realize that everything about the spiritual path is about the practice of coming into healthy relationship. First with my own mind, and then with those around me. I've been referring to water as my teacher. And this is something that I think is very important to understand about the Indigenous worldview. In my way of understanding, the earth is my mother. She's not a thing. She's not something other than myself. She's a close relative, and she cares for me by giving me every single thing I need to live. And water is my friend and my teacher. Water is a being with its own will, a relative, not a resource. There's a class of chemicals that we're finding in the environment now, in water and even in our own bodies. PFAS, per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. Some people like to call them forever chemicals. Exposure to PFAS can happen by way of food or water and can have a myriad of health problems, including thyroid disease, decreased fertility, low birth weight, decreased immune response, and cancer. It has been discovered that PFAS that's present in soil or water can be removed by certain types of herbaceous and woody plants. This is a process called phytoremediation. So when water has the opportunity to be in healthy relationship with certain plants, it can heal and be free of PFAS. So I like to emphasize that this type of pollution is not forever. In fact, many pollutants can be bioremediated with microbes, fungi, or plants when ecosystems are healthy and functioning in good balance. Hojo. If you have been on a healing or spiritual journey yourself, this is something you might be able to relate to. This path can be a lot of work. And certainly it's something that requires intention and commitment. Believe it or not, many people working in the environmental field do not know that these solutions exist. So my first action item on my list for you is education. I first learned about these solutions after that crisis I had a decade into my career. And in response to that crisis, I took a permaculture design course. Permaculture is a design science that allows us to build regenerative communities by supporting healthy relationships in all aspects of the environment. Through the lens of permaculture, I have come to understand what my grandfather intuitively knew about land and water management in his cornfield. I encourage you to educate yourself about rainwater harvesting, stormwater harvesting, gray water, and effluent reuse, and indigenous land and water management techniques. The next thing I suggest we tackle is strongly advocating for policies that support the work of rainwater harvesting and wise water management. Much of our water policy was developed at a time when we didn't really understand the natural water cycle, and when water seemed to be a lot more abundant. The truth is that we hadn't yet depleted our water account yet. Rainwater harvesting is still not legal everywhere. And in many places, it's discouraged and not considered to be a viable solution to our water crisis. There are some very good examples of policy that is supportive of rainwater harvesting that can be used to offset the outdoor use of landscape watering. And there's even good policy on supportive gray water reuse. In order to move quickly to restore basic ecological function, our watersheds really have to become adapted as quickly as possible by using rainwater harvesting. And in order to do that, we need a policy landscape that encourages and incentivizes wise management strategies. Now, tribes do have the opportunity to implement many of these practices quickly. Tribes require resources and technical support to help this happen. And this is one of the focuses of my work. This is also a powerful reason to support the land back movement. The time to act is now. Healing is needed by our water and our earth now. We need decisive action to make a move that will benefit the next 7 generations. And I'm here for it. If you're a decision maker, a city planner, a landowner, an HOA board member, a water protector, or just a concerned citizen, now is the time to consider what it looks like for you to come into a healthy relationship with water. In places where rainwater harvesting has become legal and encouraged, it's Indigenous water protectors and everyday people that made it happen. We can do this. Here in Las Vegas, where we get the least amount of rainfall in the United States, most of our domestic water use goes to residential water, and a majority of that water goes to outdoor landscape watering, mostly grasses and ornamental plants. We get more rainfall than the amount of water we use for outdoor landscape watering. We can 100% eliminate our domestic water supply use for landscape watering by using the water that falls from the sky for free. So why don't we do this? During a project I was working on here in Nevada to harvest rainwater with some local tribal elders and youth, after we finished the project, one of the elders looked at me and said that she hadn't planted a garden since before she was sent to boarding school. And if you know what's going on in boarding schools and tribal lands right now, that's profound. Healing is possible, and the time is now. Thank you.